Guys, what happened with Tesla? I was expecting my favorite carnival-barker to come on and give the usual dog and pony show and hype up the crowd and create the best spectacle ever, as he always does at every single earnings call. And yet here we are. Look at the drop that happened. And this was all on Elon. Even though the limbo bar was set as low as possible for expectations. I mean, basically, Wall Street and the consensus now, when it comes to numbers, they just take the bar and they put it on the ground. Tesla was able to not trip like they usually do with the bar on the ground. They can't put it any lower, but Tesla usually trips over it. But they didn't, and they beat on a couple things. And the stock popped. And I was like, oh, here we go. Elon has all the reason to come out now, start dancing around in his clown suit, trillion this, quadrillion that. And he didn't. It was the weirdest thing. He dropped the ball completely. I'm going to get into that more today. I also want to talk about some big announcements and chips from Google and Nvidia. But first, I got to welcome you to Ruben Tech, the only channel on the internet that meets at an intersection of tech, politics, and finance. Please be sure to like and subscribe down below. So Tesla did not trip over to the lowest possible earnings bar ever. Think if you are a CEO, like of ServiceNow, and you get a high bar set for you, and you beat that bar, and the street still punishes you by the stock falling 15% because they were, I guess, expecting more. And you have to watch this clown over here, where they literally take the bar and they lower it as far as possible. A company that is trading at 350 times earnings. Higher than even Palantir or most of the startups, okay? A company whose financials are essentially flat. Look at this. Revenue, flat. Net income actually going down. I mean, this, by any measure of a reasonable person, you say this is a dying company. But yet this company, the consensus, keeps lowering the bar as low as possible. And they barely manage to hop over the lowest possible bar. And Wall Street's cheering. I mean, it's got to be frustrating if you operate in the real and you got to watch this spectacle. But then Elon does the unthinkable. He comes out, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't on his Superman juice or whatever it is. But where I was expecting, all the big words to come out that people love, he was boring. He was flat. It would be like if Sundar Pichai was talking to you, except for it was a clown version of Sundar Pichai, because obviously Elon isn't even 1/10 of as smart as Sundar. It was weird. I was totally taken aback by it. He was actually talking about like safety with full self-driving. At the last earnings call, he was like, F safety. We're getting 1 million robo-taxis on the road by end of year. It's like, okay, good luck with that. You have 8 right now, or 12 in a fleet, 1 which operates, 4 which sometimes operate, and the other 8 never get seen. But I mean, still, that's what you expect from Elon. And now here he was like, well, we have to, Cybercab and the robotaxi deployment is going to be delayed because, yeah, we have to worry about safety. And it's like, what? So then you're like, well, the old Elon would follow that up with, but we expect $10 quadrillion. Everybody on Earth and their optimists will be taking our robocabs. And he didn't do that. It's like, what? What is going on here? He pushed back the semi again, expected. But he didn't give some weird thing where he said, every semi on Earth will be driving our semi and the semi will buy a semi off of us. It was the weirdest thing. It was like, I don't know. He must have been having a bad day. It was very odd. And people are going to be like, oh yeah, the stock dropped because people did not like the increase in CapEx. What are you talking about? Nobody cares who follows Tesla. Nobody cares about CapEx. You kidding? CapEx going from 20 billion to 25. You think that people who are paying 350 times earnings care about $5 billion increase in CapEx? Really? These are not people who care about numbers. These are people who only work off of one thing: irrationality and emotion. That's it. That's all they operate off of. And so it had nothing to do with that. I guarantee it. You see all these analysts trying to justify it. And it's like, what are you talking about? You are the guys who lower the bar so far, you just drop the bar on the ground and hope he doesn't trip over it. And now you're trying to say, well, the stock went down because they increased CapEx $5 billion. Give me a break. The stock went down because people sensed a weakness, sensed a lack of energy from Elon Musk. You see, when you're doing this, you have to maintain the spectacle at all times. Elon, look at President Donald J. Trump. You can never, ever, ever not maintain the spectacle. It always has to be maintained. Even if you're tired and you don't want to put on the show, you have to put the show on. The show must go on. Always. That's what happened. Thankfully, nowadays, it's not like the old days where they only had the real version of you. Now there's AI versions of you. So, Elon can start pumping out stuff versus tweets, et cetera, get the people frothy again. But man, he better not give any more lame performances like that. Speaking about Terafab anyways, I just want to point out this is really overhyped. This is essentially going to be Intel's factory. Now Tesla says they're going to just license the technology from Intel, but everything that I've read into it looks like Intel is running the show here. I mean, it's kind of like a partnership, but that's actually pretty smart for Elon. I think this is very smart. We saw what happened last time he tried to make chips on his own with Dojo, the supercomputer. Both those chips, of course, canceled. Not a surprise to anyone except for the fanboys who are promising us that this was going to be the biggest chips ever, best supercomputer ever, et cetera, and then it was canceled. The shock of absolutely nobody with the brain, because making chips is extremely hard. So with Terafab, a lot of people are doubting this too, but really, if you look into it, it seems that Intel's driving this. Now the worry is that, of course, Intel's 14A new fab that's coming out has not been producing the yields that it needs to make it extremely profitable, or to make it profitable, period. But the idea is that they should have that ironed out by 2028. But it might be too late by then anyways, because the two giants in the West for AI chips, Google, Alphabet, and Nvidia, had huge announcements. Alphabet's really hitting its stride. 8th generation TPUs coming out, 2 chips, one for training specifically, one for inferencing. They did this last year. Their Ironwood inferencing chip was the big deal, as they noticed, were the first to have a specialized inferencing chip. Of course, I spoke many times how this gave Google a huge advantage over their competitors, 30 to 50% cost savings over their competitors with Ironwood. And the reason for that was that Ironwood was more efficient because it only did inferencing. So all of this inferencing now that's becoming more spendy. Training is still extremely expensive, but it's like a one-time, one-off shot spending cost. But inferencing, now that you have these mixture of agents where you have multiple agents going through, talking to each other, and they both have to have KV cache load up, it just becomes extremely expensive. And so now these chips are looking at that and saying, how can we reduce costs? And of course, there's the fact that Google does not have to pay the Jensen tax, i.e. they don't run any of their workload, none of it, on Nvidia's chips. So they don't have to pay for the 70% Jensen tax. Now they have it in their cloud, but they rent that out to other people who pay for it. So now they're really pushing this cost emphasis with their 8i, their TPU 8i chips, right? We can see here they're talking about these are 30% lower costs than Google's 7th generation Ironwood TPUs. This is the 8i inferencing chip. And they're really talking about training economics. That would be the 8T. And the point here is, hey, we're 30% cheaper than our own chip. And that chip was 50% cheaper than Jensen's chip. And so I've heard terms around like 70 to 80% cheaper than what's coming out from Nvidia. Because again, remember, Nvidia, you have to pay the 7% Jensen tax. And think about that. Your Sam Altman, your Claude. Every time you buy an Nvidia chip and you're going to serve a customer, Google has a 70 to 80% cost advantage over you. It makes it very hard to compete, which is why Claude especially, but even OpenAI now, they're starting to come over to Google saying, we need these chips. We saw Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg actually talking about wanting to buy them and have them in-house, i.e. have them in his own data center. We do see that Google is looking for that. They're also looking for a deal with Anthropic, where Anthropic will have their own data center filled with these chips. But that is not too big of a worry to Nvidia, because obviously Google is not a chip foundry. They cannot just overnight start generating enough of these to satiate demand. But Nvidia is not going to sit on its hands. It knows that Vera Rubin cannot compete on its own with the specialized chipsets that the TPUs offer. Remember, Vera is actually the general purpose CPU, but Ruben is a GPU that just happens to be good at AI. Well, they're like, that can't compete with tensor processing units, which are only developed for AI, or anything with tensors, of course. And so they're saying, okay, they bought this company called Groq, not Elon's Groq, a chip manufacturer. And Groq made special inferencing chips, and now they're releasing their Groq 3 AI inferencing accelerator. This is a direct shot towards Google saying, hey, we will be able to compete with you. For all the people looking, all the large hyperscalers, all the large AI agents that are looking now at Google saying, how do we get our hands on your chips? Nvidia is saying, remember, we have CUDA. We have all the tools for you. And now we can offer Groq. And Nvidia is also starting to note the general purposeness of Ruben, even in some sense. Because let me just give you a really odd case here. When you talk to an LLM and it has to do math, it's not efficient at math, right? An LLM is not good at doing 5 plus 5, believe it or not, which a generalized CPU can do extremely fast. And so Nvidia is saying, hey, we have the ability for you to put specialized general agents that are like a calculator onto the same chip efficiently, where a tensor processing unit actually isn't as efficient as that, because it's only made for one thing, which is processing these tensors that are used in these LLMs and other types of AIs. Speed meets scale. Very interesting. Another point I want to bring up quick. Gemma 4, I don't think this gets mentioned enough. Open source, Apache 2 license. You can take this product from Google and you can compete with Google commercially with it. You do not have to release your code back. Alphabet is the one company in the West right now that has the entire stack. They have the high level, large Gemini models for the consumers. They have they're building out the development tools, anti-gravity IDE, Gemini CLI, etc. for developers. They have the Gemini Enterprise for the business, and they're also going towards open source super hard. China's been making a big push into open source, but remember that Google started this game. There are 2 papers and basically started this entire industry. Attention is all that matters, and the TensorFlow paper that released in 2014. Open source papers from Google, and they're continuing on that. This isn't anything new. Google, as you know, Alphabet has been huge in open source forever. And I just find it interesting, again, to note that while we have things like OpenAI, which are not open at all, Claude, which does not profess to be open, Google is attacking it from all aspects. They're saying, hey, we can play the closed game. Hey, we're going to play the open game. We're going to play every single game out there. And not only are they doing that, but they're also doing a hardware game. And Nvidia has chosen not to respond in some of that. Because even though they're talking about the agentic AI frontier, they have announced that they will not be moving into the public cloud hyperscaler space. They do have a cloud, but they did announce they're not going to be competing with AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, which I think might be a missed opportunity for them. I guess we'll have to see. Jensen obviously runs a $1 trillion company, and I don't. So it'll be interesting to see. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments down below. Did you watch Tesla's earning call? Did you think Elon was a little bit lacking energy? Let me know what you think. Have a great day.